The gunshot echoed across the dusty main street of Redemption Creek, sending a flock of startled birds into the pale blue Montana sky. Willow Stone didn't flinch, her steady hands continuing to secure the loose wheel on her wagon as townsfolk scattered for cover. She'd heard worse in her 24 years, most of them spent fighting to prove that a woman could survive just fine on her own in this unforgiving territory. "Miss, you might want to take shelter," a deep voice called out behind her. Willow didn't bother looking up. "And leave my supplies unattended?" "No thank you, sir. This wheel won't fix itself." The stranger stepped closer, his spurs jingling softly against the packed dirt. "Those are Blackwell's men causing trouble. They don't much care who gets caught in their crossfire." "Neither does this wheel if it breaks when I'm halfway to my homestead," she replied, giving the final bolt a firm twist with her wrench. Only then did she straighten and turn. The man before her stood tall against the setting sun, his features partially shadowed by a worn leather hat. Dusty trail clothes couldn't disguise his broad shoulders or the confident way he carried himself. A gun belt hung low on his hips, the holster showing signs of frequent use. "Name's Hunter Reed," he said, tipping his hat slightly. "Just rode into town." Another shot rang out, closer this time. Hunter instinctively moved toward her, but Willow held up her hand. "I've been ducking bullets in this town since before you knew which end of that pistol to hold, Mr. Reed. I don't need saving." A hint of a smile played across his weather-beaten face. "Then let me just love you." The words hung in the air between them, outrageous and unexpected. Willow blinked, certain she'd misheard him. "Excuse me." "Figure of speech, madam," he clarified, though something in his eyes suggested he wasn't entirely joking. "Around these parts, it means I'm offering friendship, nothing more. Seems like you could use a friend with Blackwell's gang running wild." Willow returned her wrench to the toolbox and closed it with a decisive snap. "I've got plenty of friends, Mr. Reed. What I need is to get these supplies home before dark." The commotion down the street was growing louder. Through the haze of dust and gun smoke, Willow could make out several men stumbling out of the saloon, followed by the town marshal trying to restore order. "At least let me help you load up," Hunter offered, already reaching for a heavy sack of flour. Willow wanted to refuse on principle, but practicality won out. "Fine. Just the loading." They worked in efficient silence, transferring her purchases from the boardwalk to the wagon bed. Hunter moved with purpose, arranging everything to distribute the weight evenly, something she would have done herself. She noted grudgingly. "You know your way around a wagon," she commented, securing a tarp over the supplies. "Drove freight between St. Louis and Santa Fe for 3 years," he replied. "Before that, I ran cattle up from Texas." "And now," Hunter paused, watching as the marshal finally got the situation under control down the street. "Now I'm looking for a place to put down roots. Heard there might be work at the Galloway Ranch." Willow climbed onto the wagon seat and gathered the reins. "Old man Galloway passed last winter. His daughter Helena runs it now with her husband. They still hiring? They might be. Helena's a fair employer, better than most in these parts." Willow hesitated before adding, "My place borders their northern pasture. I trade with them regularly." Hunter nodded, stepping back from the wagon. "Then I reckon I'll be seeing you around, Miss Stone, Willow Stone." She clicked her tongue, urging her horses forward. "And don't count on it, Mr. Reed. I keep to myself." As she guided her team down the street, Willow found herself glancing back. Hunter Reed stood where she'd left him, watching her departure with an inscrutable expression. Something about his steady gaze made her pulse quicken in a way she hadn't felt in years. And that was precisely the kind of complication she'd sworn to avoid. The dirt road leading out of Redemption Creek wound through rolling hills covered in prairie grass, golden in the late afternoon sun of June, 1878. Willow let her horses set an easy pace, mindful of the weight they pulled and the 5-mile journey ahead. Her homestead sat nestled against a backdrop of pine-covered foothills, well away from town and its troubles. She'd claimed the land 3 years ago after her father's death, fighting off both the elements and the skepticism of neighbors who gave a woman a loan 6 months at most before failure forced her to sell. Some had even made offers, assuming desperation would eventually drive down her price. They'd underestimated her determination. The daughter of a trapper and a Cherokee mother, Willow had grown up learning to rely on herself in a world that offered little mercy to those who couldn't. Her father had taught her to hunt, trap, and trade. Her mother had shown her how to heal with plants and listen to the wisdom of the land. Both had instilled in her a fierce independence that served as both shield and sword against a world determined to make her dependent on others, particularly men. As the wagon crested a hill, Willow caught sight of riders in the distance, moving fast across her neighbor's property. Even from afar, she recognized the Galloway Ranch hands by their distinctive gray horses and one unfamiliar figure among them. Something in the stranger's posture struck her as familiar, though she couldn't place it at this distance. By the time she reached her homestead, the sun was setting in earnest, painting the sky in vivid oranges and purples. Her small cabin, built of hand-hewn logs with a stone chimney, sat in a clearing surrounded by a split-rail fence. A modest barn stood nearby, along with a chicken coop and vegetable garden. It wasn't much compared to the sprawling Galloway Ranch, but it was hers, earned through sweat and determination. Her border collie, Patch, came bounding out to greet her, followed more sedately by Juniper, her gray tabby cat. The animals were her only regular companions, though Helena Galloway visited when she could, bringing news and occasional company. "Easy there, boy," Willow said as Patch circled the wagon excitedly. "Let me get these horses taken care of first." The evening routine was familiar and comforting, unhitching the team, rubbing them down, and setting them loose in the corral with fresh hay and water. Only then did she begin unloading her supplies, carrying what she could into the cabin and leaving the heavier items for morning. As she worked, her thoughts drifted to the stranger in town. Hunter Reed had an easy confidence about him that she found both irritating and intriguing. Men like him usually passed through quickly, chasing whatever horizon promised adventure or fortune. They weren't the staying kind, which was just as well. She had no room in her life for distractions, especially not ones with penetrating eyes and a smile that seemed to see right through her carefully constructed defenses. "Don't be foolish," she muttered to herself as she lit the oil lamp on her table. "He's just another drifter." But as she prepared a simple supper of cornbread and beans, Willow found herself wondering if he'd found work at the Galloway Ranch. If he had, their paths would likely cross again, whether she wished it or not. The thought both unsettled and excited her in equal measure. Dawn broke clear and cool the next morning. Willow rose with the first light, as was her habit, dressing quickly in a practical work shirt and split skirt. After a breakfast of coffee and leftover cornbread, she headed out to complete her chores. She was in the middle of mending a section of fence when she heard hoofbeats approaching. Straightening, she shaded her eyes against the morning sun to see Helena Galloway riding toward her, accompanied by a now familiar figure. "Morning, Willow," Helena called out cheerfully. A petite woman with auburn hair tucked under a wide-brimmed hat, she managed the ranch with the same quiet competence that had characterized her father's tenure. "Helena," Willow nodded, trying not to focus on the man beside her. "Early for a social call." "Not entirely social." Helena dismounted gracefully, tying her horse to the fence. "I've hired new help. Thought I'd introduce him since he'll be working the north pasture most days." Hunter Reed tipped his hat, his expression neutral. "Miss Stone, good to see you again." "Mr. Reed found work quickly, I see," Willow replied, driving another nail into the fence post with perhaps more force than necessary. Helena looked between them, her eyebrows raised. "You two know each other." "We met briefly in town yesterday," Hunter explained. "Miss Stone was having trouble with her wagon." "I was fixing my wagon," Willow corrected, "when Mr. Reed offered unsolicited assistance." Helena smiled knowingly. "Well, that's Hunter for you, already proving useful. He tracked down 3 of our strays yesterday, evening the ones that keep finding that gap in the northwest corner." Willow couldn't help being impressed, despite herself. That particular section of the Galloway property was notoriously difficult terrain, with ravines and thick brush that made tracking challenging even for experienced hands. "Found your fence problem too," Hunter added. "Old cottonwood fell and took out about 20 feet of wire. We'll have it fixed by sundown." "That's been an ongoing issue," Willow admitted. "Those cattle have been wandering onto my property for months." Helena nodded sympathetically, "Which brings me to my other reason for visiting. I need to survey that boundary line again, make sure we're building the new fence in the right place." "Would you mind if Hunter rides your property line with me today?" Willow hesitated. Having them on her land made sense practically, but something about Hunter's presence made her uneasy in ways she couldn't quite define. "I should come along," she decided. "I know exactly where the markers are." "Perfect," Helena beamed. "We can make a proper outing of it. I brought lunch more than enough for 3. Hunter's eyes met Willow's, and for a moment she thought she saw amusement there, as if he understood her reluctance and found it entertaining. The observation only strengthened her resolve to maintain a professional distance. "Let me saddle up," she said, setting down her hammer. "I'll meet you at the north corner in 15 minutes. As Willow walked to her barn, she heard Helena and Hunter speaking quietly behind her. She couldn't make out the words, but Helena's light laugh carried on the breeze. Whatever he'd said had clearly charmed her employer, not surprising, given the easy way he carried himself. Men like Hunter Reed had a way of fitting in wherever they landed, making connections that served them well until they inevitably moved on. The thought should have reassured her. Instead, it left her with an unexpected hollow feeling as she prepared for the day ahead. The 3 of them rode along the boundary between the properties, stopping occasionally to check survey markers or discuss the terrain. Helena kept the conversation flowing easily, sharing stories about the ranch and asking Hunter about his previous work. Willow contributed when necessary but mostly observed, noting how Hunter's eyes constantly scanned their surroundings, alert to details others might miss. "That creek floods every spring," Willow pointed out as they approached a shallow stream bed. "Any fence you build here needs to account for that." Hunter dismounted to examine the ground more closely. "Could build up these banks a bit, give the water a channel to follow instead of spreading out. Would save you both some trouble." "That would take considerable work," Helena said doubtfully. "I've done similar before," he replied, remounting smoothly. "In Texas, water management makes the difference between profit and ruin for many ranches." Willow studied him with newfound interest. "You know a lot about ranching for a man who was driving freight wagons." His expression remained neutral, but something flickered in his eyes. "I've had various occupations, Miss Stone. Each taught me something useful. Hunter was telling me he worked on one of the largest spreads in the Texas Panhandle," Helena added. "The Circle Diamond." Willow's eyebrows rose slightly. The Circle Diamond was well known even this far north, a vast operation run by one of the wealthiest cattle barons in the country. That's quite a reference. It was a good place to learn, Hunter acknowledged. Though I prefer the mountains to the plains, more places for a man to catch his breath. There was something in his tone that hinted at deeper reasons for leaving Texas. But before Willow could consider it further, they reached a shaded grove by a larger stream, the perfect spot for their midday meal. Helena spread a blanket while Hunter unsaddled the horses, allowing them to graze nearby. Willow helped unpack the food: fried chicken, biscuits, and apple tarts that Helena's cook had prepared. "This is quite a feast for a boundary inspection," Willow commented, arranging the food on the blanket. Helena's smile was slightly mischievous. "Well, I may have had an ulterior motive. Thomas is bringing some potential buyers to see our yearlings tomorrow, and I wanted to escape the preparations for a few hours." "How is Thomas?" Willow asked, referring to Helena's husband of 2 years. "Busy as always. The railroad's progress has him convinced we need to expand our operation." Helena passed around plates. "He's probably right, but sometimes I miss the simpler days when it was just father and me running things." Hunter settled on the blanket across from Willow. "The railroad changes everything it touches." "You sound like you don't consider that a good thing," Willow observed. He shrugged, accepting a plate from Helena. "Progress has its place, but so does tradition. The best path usually lies somewhere between rushing forward and standing still." "A diplomatic answer," Willow said, finding herself curious about his true opinions. "Not diplomatic, just honest." Hunter bit into a piece of chicken. "This is excellent, Mrs. Galloway." "Helena, please," she insisted. "And I'll pass your compliments to Mei Lin. She's been with us since father brought her back from San Francisco 15 years ago. Best cook in the territory." The conversation flowed more easily as they ate, with Helena doing most of the talking. She mentioned local families, upcoming events in town, and ranch business in a steady stream that required little more than occasional nods from her companions. Willow found herself studying Hunter when he wasn't looking her way. Despite his trail-worn appearance, there was an undeniable refinement to his manners that suggested education, or at least exposure to more civilized settings than the frontier typically offered. His hands, while calloused from work, handled the simple food with a certain grace. "What brought you to Montana, Mr. Reed?" she asked during a lull in Helena's monologue. He met her gaze directly. "A desire for fresh air and new opportunities." "That's rather vague." A slight smile touched his lips. "Most people's reasons for being anywhere are vague when you examine them closely, Miss Stone. What keeps you on this particular patch of land?" The question caught her off guard. "It's my home." "By choice or by circumstance?" "Both," she replied after a moment's consideration. "My father claimed this land. After he died, I stayed because I wanted to, not because I had nowhere else to go." Hunter nodded thoughtfully. "That's a luxury many don't have, choosing their own place rather than having it chosen for them." There was something in his tone that suggested personal experience, but before Willow could pursue it, Helena stood up, brushing crumbs from her riding skirt. "We should continue if we want to complete the entire boundary today," she announced. "The western section has some rough terrain." They packed up quickly and continued their survey, the conversation turning back to practical matters of fencing and cattle management. By late afternoon, they had circled back to where they'd started, having covered the entire shared boundary between the two properties. "I appreciate your time, Willow," Helena said as they prepared to part ways. "Hunter will start on that fence repair tomorrow if that suits you." Willow nodded. "The sooner the better. I've got crops coming up that won't take kindly to being trampled by wayward cattle." "I'll be here at first light," Hunter promised. "Won't disturb your routine." As Helena turned her horse toward home, Hunter lingered a moment longer. "It was a pleasure riding with you today, Miss Stone." Something in his direct gaze made Willow's pulse quicken unexpectedly. It was informative. A smile tugged at one corner of his mouth. "That's not quite a compliment, but I'll take it as progress nonetheless." With a tip of his hat, he turned to follow Helena, leaving Willow watching his departure with mixed emotions. She told herself it was merely caution making her heart beat faster, natural wariness around a stranger who seemed determined to insert himself into her carefully ordered life. But as she turned toward her cabin, Willow couldn't quite convince herself that caution was all she felt. True to his word, Hunter arrived as dawn was breaking the next morning. Willow, already up and tending to her chickens, watched his approach with a mixture of apprehension and something else she refused to name. "Morning, Miss Stone," he called out, leading a pack horse loaded with fence supplies behind his own mount. "Mr. Reed." She nodded, continuing to scatter feed for her clucking brood. "Figured I'd check in before heading to the fence line," he said, dismounting smoothly. "Make sure you don't have any concerns about the work." Willow closed the gate to the chicken run and turned to face him fully. "Just one, why are you really here, Mr. Reed?" His expression remained neutral, though something flickered in his eyes. "I told you, looking for work, a place to settle." "There are easier places than Redemption Creek to put down roots," she pointed out. "Larger towns with more opportunities, less isolated." "Maybe I prefer isolation." He adjusted his hat, shielding his eyes from the rising sun. "Same as you, it seems. I was born here, you weren't." Hunter regarded her thoughtfully. "You're suspicious by nature, or is it just me that brings it out in you?" The directness of the question caught her off guard. Willow found herself answering honestly before she could think better of it. "Both, perhaps. This territory isn't kind to those who trust too easily." "Fair enough," he nodded. "I've got nothing to hide, Miss Stone, but I understand caution. Wouldn't have survived this long without it myself." Something in his tone made her wonder again about his past, but she resisted the urge to pry further. "The broken fence is about half a mile north, following that creek bed. I can show you if you like." "I remember from yesterday," he assured her. "Don't want to keep you from your work." Willow hesitated, torn between her natural inclination to keep to herself and a reluctant curiosity about this man. "I need to check my vegetable garden in that direction anyway. I'll walk with you part way." If he was surprised by her offer, he didn't show it. Hunter simply nodded and began leading his horses toward the north pasture, falling into step beside her. They walked in silence for several minutes, the only sounds the early morning birdsong and the soft thud of hooves on the packed earth path. Willow found herself unusually aware of his presence, the confident stride, the subtle scent of leather and pine that seemed to surround him, the way his eyes continually scanned their surroundings with quiet vigilance. "You always this alert?" she asked finally. Hunter glanced at her, a hint of a smile touching his lips. "Habit. The day a man stops paying attention to what's around him is usually his last." "Sounds like you've had reason to be cautious yourself. Everyone who survives out here has their stories." He gestured toward a jagged scar visible on her forearm below her rolled-up sleeve. "Including you, I'd wager." Willow instinctively touched the old injury. "Mountain lion, 3 years ago. It was after my chickens." "And you went after it, with my father's shotgun," she confirmed. "Got the cat, but not before it left its mark." Hunter nodded appreciatively. "Most would have let it take the chickens." "Most don't live alone with limited food sources," she countered. "Those chickens represent eggs, meat, and tradable goods, worth a scar." "Practical thinking," he acknowledged. "I respect that." They reached a fork in the path, one branch leading toward her garden, the other continuing to the damaged fence line. "I'll leave you to your work, Mr. Reed," Willow said, gesturing toward the north trail. Hunter tipped his hat. "Much obliged for the company, Miss Stone. I should have the main section repaired by sundown. Might need another day for reinforcing." She nodded. "I'll check your progress this evening." As she turned toward her garden, Willow felt his eyes on her back, but resisted the urge to look over her shoulder. There was something unsettling about Hunter Reed's attention, not threatening, but intense in a way that made her more aware of herself than she'd been in years. The feeling lingered as she worked through her morning chores, checking the sprouting vegetables and clearing weeds from between the rows. Despite the physical distance between them, she found herself glancing northward occasionally, as if she might catch a glimpse of him working on the fence line. "This is ridiculous," she muttered to herself after the third such glance. "He's just a hired hand doing his job." Yet she couldn't shake the awareness of his presence on her land, like a pebble in her boot that constantly reminded her of its existence no matter how she tried to ignore it. By mid-afternoon, Willow had completed her most pressing tasks and found herself with no excuse to avoid checking on the fence repair. Telling herself it was merely responsible land management, she set off toward the north pasture, Patch trotting along beside her. The sound of hammering guided her to Hunter's location. As she approached, she saw that he had already replaced several posts and was stringing new wire between them, working with efficient precision. He glanced up as she approached, wiping sweat from his brow with a bandana. "Miss Stone." "Come to inspect my work." "Just checking progress," she replied, examining the repaired section. "You've accomplished quite a bit for one day." "Had good materials to work with," he said, gesturing to the supplies Helena had provided. "Quality tools make all the difference." Willow nodded, finding no fault with his workmanship. The new posts were set deep and solid, the wire strung taut between them. "You've done this before." "Many times." He returned to securing a wire to a post. "Built miles of fence in Texas, some in Wyoming too. You've moved around quite a bit." Hunter continued working as he answered. "Nature of the profession. Cattle drives, ranch work, they tend to be seasonal. Man either moves on or finds something else to do in between." "And now you're looking to stay in one place." Willow couldn't keep the skepticism from her voice. He straightened, meeting her gaze directly. "Is that so hard to believe, for most men who have spent their lives drifting?" "Yes." Hunter's expression remained unreadable as he considered her words. "Fair enough. But people change, Miss Stone. Priorities shift." "What shifted yours?" The question came out before she could reconsider it. He was quiet for a long moment, his eyes moving to the distant mountains. "Seeing too many sunsets from unfamiliar ground. Realizing that freedom without purpose becomes its own kind of prison eventually." The unexpected depth of his answer caught her off guard. Before she could respond, Hunter returned his attention to the fence, changing the subject. "This creek floods badly." Willow allowed the diversion, pointing out how the water typically flowed during spring runoff. "It can rise 3 feet or more in a heavy rain. That's why the fence keeps washing out." Hunter nodded thoughtfully. "We should build it up higher here, maybe add some stones to create a more defined channel. Would you mind if I made those improvements while I'm at it?" "That seems beyond what Helena hired you to do," he shrugged. "No sense doing half a job. If it washes out again in the spring, we'll just be back here rebuilding." Willow found herself impressed by his foresight despite her determination to remain neutral. "If you think it necessary, I have no objection." "Good." He smiled briefly, the expression transforming his weathered features in a way that made her pulse quicken unexpectedly. "Might take an extra day or two, as long as Helena approves the additional time. Already discussed it with her." She agrees it's worth doing right the first time. Willow nodded, suddenly aware that she had no further reason to linger. Well, I'll leave you to it then. Actually, Hunter said, reaching for his canteen, I was about to take a break. Would appreciate some company if you're not in a hurry. She hesitated, torn between her usual solitary habits and an undeniable curiosity about this man who spoke of freedom as a prison. I suppose I could rest a moment. They settled in the shade of a cottonwood tree, Hunter offering his canteen, which she accepted after a moment's hesitation. The water was cool and refreshing after her walk in the afternoon sun. How long have you been working this land alone? He asked as she handed back the canteen. 3 years since my father passed, but I've lived here most of my life. Your mother died when I was 12. Influenza. Willow rarely spoke of her family to anyone, yet found the words coming easily now. She was Cherokee, met my father when he was trapping near her people's territory. Hunter nodded thoughtfully. Explains your self-sufficiency. Not many women or men, for that matter, could manage a homestead single-handedly. I didn't have much choice, she replied. This land is all I have. You could have sold it, moved to town. The suggestion, though practical, made her bristle. And done what? Married the first man who offered security. Taken in washing or sewing to survive. You object to marriage on principle. His tone was curious rather than judgmental. Willow sighed, plucking a blade of grass to twist between her fingers. Not marriage itself. The necessity of it for women with few other options. Hunter was quiet for a moment, watching as a hawk circled lazily overhead. My mother felt the same way. The personal revelation surprised her. Yet she married. For love, not necessity. She was a school teacher in St. Louis. Could have supported herself indefinitely. A faint smile touched his lips. She made sure my father understood that before accepting his proposal. And did he understand? He respected her independence. It was what drew him to her in the first place. Hunter's expression grew more serious. Not all men are looking to cage a wild thing, Miss Stone. Some prefer to run alongside. The metaphor struck her with unexpected force. Most men she'd encountered since her father's death had indeed approached her as something to be tamed or controlled, seeing her self-sufficiency as a challenge rather than a quality to be respected. That's been rare in my experience, she admitted. Then you've been meeting the wrong kind of men. Hunter stood, brushing dust from his pants. I should get back to work if I want to finish this section before dark. Willow rose as well, suddenly aware that they'd been talking like old acquaintances rather than virtual strangers. Yes, I have things to attend to as well. As she turned to leave, Hunter called after her. Miss Stone, she paused, looking back over her shoulder. Thank you for the company. His expression was open, the usual guarded look momentarily absent. Makes the work go easier. Willow nodded, uncertain how to respond to his simple gratitude. Good day, Mr. Reed. As she walked back toward her cabin, Patch trotting ahead, Willow found her thoughts returning to their conversation. Hunter Reed was proving to be more complex than she'd initially judged, and that realization was both intriguing and unsettling in equal measure. Over the next 3 days, Willow found herself creating increasingly flimsy excuses to check on the fence work. Each time, Hunter greeted her with the same quiet courtesy, often pausing his labor to share water or exchange observations about the land and weather. Their conversations remained largely impersonal, yet Willow sensed a gradual easing of the tension between them, a tentative bridge forming across the gap of their initial wariness. On the 4th day, she arrived to find him placing the final stones in a carefully constructed channel designed to direct the creek's flow safely under the reinforced fence. Impressive, she acknowledged, studying the work. This should withstand even the heaviest spring runoff. Hunter straightened, wiping muddy hands on his pants. That's the plan. Helena's sending one of her hands to inspect it tomorrow, but I believe it'll meet with approval. You've put more effort into this than was required, Willow observed. He shrugged. I don't believe in halfway measures. Besides, it benefits both properties. A comfortable silence fell between them as Hunter gathered his tools. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the pasture, painting the landscape in gold and amber hues. I've been meaning to ask, Willow said finally, what you meant that first day in town. Hunter glanced at her questioningly. When you said then, let me just love you, she clarified, feeling strangely nervous broaching the subject. You claimed it was a figure of speech, but I've never heard that expression before. A smile touched his lips. Because I made it up on the spot. Her eyebrows rose in surprise. Why would you say such a thing to a complete stranger? Hunter considered her for a moment before answering. Because you were so determined to prove you needed no help, I wanted to offer something else entirely. He paused, his expression thoughtful. Sometimes what people reject isn't assistance itself, but the implication that they are incapable. Offering friendship or more carries no such judgment. Willow found herself unsettled by his insight. That's perceptive. Just observant, he replied, loading the last of his tools onto the packhorse. I should head back. There's still enough light to report to Helena before dark. Willow nodded, suddenly reluctant to see him go. Will you? That is, does Helena have other work planned for you near my property? The question hung between them, more revealing than she'd intended. Hunter studied her face for a moment, his expression softening. Not immediately, he answered. Though I'll be helping with cattle rotation in this area next week. I see. Willow busied herself adjusting her hat to hide the unexpected disappointment his answer provoked. However, he continued, I was planning to ride into town for supplies on Saturday. The trail passes near your homestead. She glanced up, meeting his steady gaze. Are you asking permission to use the trail, Mr. Reed? A hint of amusement warmed his eyes. I'm wondering if you might consider joining me. The journey's more pleasant with company. The invitation caught her off guard. Going to town with Hunter would be seen by others, there would be talk, assumptions made about their relationship. Yet she found herself strangely unconcerned by the prospect. I do need a few things from the mercantile, she said carefully. What time were you planning to leave? Mid-morning would put us in town by noon, back before dark. Willow nodded, making her decision. I'll be ready at 10 o'clock. Something like pleasure flickered across Hunter's features, quickly masked by his usual composure. I'll meet you here then. As he mounted his horse and rode away, Willow remained by the creek, watching until he disappeared over the ridge. Only then did she acknowledge the fluttering sensation in her stomach, anticipation, mingled with an emotion she hadn't allowed herself to feel in years. Saturday dawned clear and mild, perfect weather for the ride into town. Willow found herself unusually particular about her appearance, selecting her best riding skirt and a blouse her mother had embroidered with delicate wildflower patterns around the collar. She even took extra time with her hair, braiding it more neatly than her usual hasty plait. This isn't a social occasion, she reminded her reflection sternly. It's a practical arrangement. But the flush in her cheeks told a different story as she gathered her market basket and headed out to wait for Hunter. He arrived precisely at 10, riding at an unhurried pace that suggested he'd timed his journey carefully. The sight of him caused that now familiar flutter in her stomach, a reaction she was becoming increasingly unable to ignore. Morning, Miss Stone, he called, tipping his hat. Ready for our expedition, Willow nodded, mounting her mare with practiced ease. I have a list of necessities to purchase. "As do I," he replied, falling in beside her as they set off down the trail. "Though I admit I'm looking forward to a meal at the hotel. Mrs. Chen's cooking has quite a reputation." "You haven't tried it yet," Hunter shook his head. "Been taking my meals at the ranch." "But Helena speaks highly of the hotel restaurant. It's one of the few civilized establishments in Redemption Creek," Willow acknowledged. "Mr. Chen is particular about maintaining standards despite our remote location." Their conversation flowed easily as they rode, discussing the local businesses and characters that made up the small frontier town. Hunter asked thoughtful questions about the area's history, listening attentively to her answers. For her part, Willow found herself increasingly curious about his past experiences. "You mentioned Wyoming before," she said as they crossed a shallow stream. "What took you there?" "Cattle drive initially," he replied. "Then I stayed on through a winter working for a rancher near Cheyenne." "Good man, fair employer. Yet you left." Hunter's expression grew distant. "There was trouble with rustlers. The rancher's son was killed in a confrontation. After that, the place held too many dark memories for everyone." The simple statement hinted at deeper connections than mere employment. "You were close to the family, close enough to feel their loss as my own," he said quietly. "Sometimes the best thing you can do for people is give them space to grieve without reminders of what happened." Willow studied his profile, struck by the compassion underlying his words. "That seems a lonely way to live, always moving on when connections grow deep." "It has been," he admitted, surprising her with his candor. "Which is why I'm hoping Redemption Creek might be different." Before she could respond, they crested a hill that offered a view of the town in the distance. The conversation naturally shifted to their plans for the day, but Willow found herself replaying his words as they rode the final miles. Redemption Creek was bustling with its usual Saturday activity when they arrived. Farmers and ranchers from outlying areas filled the streets, conducting business and socializing in equal measure. Willow was acutely aware of the curious glances directed their way as she and Hunter rode side by side down the main street. "Seems we're attracting attention," Hunter observed quietly as they dismounted in front of the mercantile. "Small towns thrive on gossip," Willow replied, attempting nonchalance despite her discomfort. "By supper time, half the territory will have us engaged to be married." A smile touched his lips. Would that be so terrible? The question, however lightly delivered, sent a jolt through her. "Mr. Reed, Hunter," he corrected gently. "After a week of conversations, I think we've earned the right to first names, don't you?" Willow hesitated, then nodded. "Hunter then, and yes, you may call me Willow." "Thank you, Willow." The way he said her name, with a certain warmth that emphasized the first syllable, made it sound different than when others spoke it. "Now, shall we tackle our shopping before lunch?" The mercantile was crowded, but they moved efficiently through their respective lists. Willow noticed how Hunter quietly helped an elderly woman reach items on a high shelf and assisted a harried mother by entertaining her young son while she completed her purchases. These small kindnesses were offered without fanfare or expectation of thanks, simply natural extensions of his character. When they had finished their shopping and arranged for the heavier items to be delivered, Hunter suggested they proceed to the hotel for lunch. The prospect of dining together in public felt suddenly significant, but Willow found herself nodding agreement before she could overthink the implications. The hotel dining room was nearly full, but the proprietor, Mr. Chen, greeted Willow warmly and found them a small table near the window. Several patrons glanced their way with undisguised curiosity. "Your presence here is causing quite a stir," Hunter observed quietly after they had ordered. "I gather you don't often dine in town." "Not with male companions," she admitted. though Helena and I occasionally meet here when she has business in town. I hope I haven't put you in an uncomfortable position." Willow considered this, surprised to realize that despite the attention, she wasn't actually uncomfortable. "No, people will talk regardless of what I do. I stopped letting that dictate my actions years ago." Hunter's expression warmed with approval. A philosophy more should adopt. Their food arrived: tender roast beef with vegetables for Hunter, chicken and dumplings for Willow, momentarily pausing their conversation. The meal was indeed excellent, living up to the establishment's reputation. As they ate, Willow found herself increasingly aware of how easy it felt to be in Hunter's company. Unlike many men she'd encountered, he neither dominated the conversation nor treated her with condescending deference. Instead, he engaged with her as an equal, listening to her opinions and offering his own without expectation that she would automatically defer to his judgment. After lunch, they stepped back onto the boardwalk to find the street even more crowded than before. A freight wagon had overturned near the bank, spilling crates across the road and drawing a crowd of onlookers. "Looks like we might be delayed in leaving," Hunter observed. "Would you like to wait it out or find something else to occupy our time?" Willow considered their options. "There's a small exhibition at the schoolhouse, paintings by a traveling artist who's been staying with Reverend Miller's family. Helena mentioned it might be worth seeing." "Lead the way," Hunter agreed readily. The schoolhouse sat at the edge of town, a simple clapboard building that served as church, meeting hall, and educational facility depending on the day and need. Today, its walls were adorned with landscape paintings depicting the dramatic vistas of the Montana Territory. "These are remarkable," Willow murmured, studying a scene of moonlight on snow-covered mountains. "He's captured the quality of light perfectly." Hunter nodded, moving to stand beside her. "Reminds me of a night I spent camped in the Bitterroots 3 winters ago. Sky so clear you could read by the starlight." "You've seen a lot of this country," she observed. "Parts of it. Never enough." His voice held a quiet appreciation that resonated with her own love of the land. Each region has its own character, its own beauty. They moved slowly through the exhibition, sharing observations and occasional personal memories prompted by the scenes. Willow found herself speaking of places she'd explored with her father as a child: secret valleys where wildflowers bloomed in riotous profusion, hidden waterfalls that sparkled like diamonds in the summer sun. "You know this territory as few do," Hunter remarked as they paused before a painting of a river valley that Willow had immediately identified as the Yellowstone's northern branch. "It's in my blood," she replied simply. "My mother's people understood that knowing the land means more than just mapping its features. It means understanding its rhythms, its moods, its secret places. She taught you well, what she could in the time we had." Willow rarely spoke of her mother, finding the memories both precious and painful. "After she died, I tried to honor her by continuing to learn the old ways, even as my father taught me the new." Hunter's expression held genuine interest rather than the polite curiosity she'd come to expect when mentioning her heritage. A valuable legacy, having feet in both worlds. "Sometimes it feels more like being caught between them," she admitted, "not fully belonging to either." "Perhaps that's its own kind of strength," he suggested. "Seeing with different eyes gives you perspective others lack." The insight struck her deeply, offering a new way to view what she'd often experienced as division. Before she could respond, they were interrupted by the arrival of Reverend Miller and his wife, accompanied by a slender man with paint-stained fingers who could only be the artist himself. Introductions were made, and the conversation turned to the exhibition. Willow noticed how naturally Hunter engaged with the artist, asking informed questions about technique and composition that revealed an unexpected knowledge of the subject. "You're familiar with painting?" she asked quietly as they moved toward the exit some time later. He smiled slightly. "My mother believed in a well-rounded education. Art was among her many interests." The small revelation added another layer to her gradually forming image of the man beside her, a complexity that increasingly intrigued her. By the time they left the schoolhouse, the street had been cleared and the afternoon was advancing. They collected their horses and purchases, beginning the journey home as the sun began its western descent. The ride back was quieter, both of them content with occasional observations rather than sustained conversation. As they approached the fork where their paths would diverge, Hunter toward the Galloway Ranch, Willow to her homestead, a reluctance to part slowed their pace. "Thank you for your company today," Hunter said as they drew their horses to a halt at the crossroads. "It was the most pleasant trip to town I've had in quite some time." "I enjoyed it as well," Willow admitted, surprising herself with her candor. "More than I expected to." His smile was warm in the golden light of late afternoon. High praise indeed. A moment of silence stretched between them, filled with unspoken thoughts. Finally, Hunter spoke again. "I mentioned I'll be working with the herd in the North Pasture next week. Would it be an imposition if I stopped by your place when the day's work is done? Perhaps share some of that coffee you purchased today?" The invitation was presented casually, yet Willow sensed its significance. Allowing Hunter to visit her home, not for work but for social purposes, represented a step beyond their cautious friendship toward something undefined but potentially profound. "I would like that," she said finally, her voice steadier than the flutter in her chest. "Thursday, perhaps." "I bake bread that day." The pleasure in his expression was unmistakable. "Thursday it is, then. I'll bring some honey. Helena's bees produced an exceptional batch this year." With a tip of his hat and a lingering glance that warmed her more than the afternoon sun, Hunter turned his horse toward the Galloway property. Willow remained at the crossroads a moment longer, watching his retreating figure and wondering at the strange mixture of anticipation and apprehension that filled her at the prospect of his return. Thursday arrived with agonizing slowness, each day between seeming to stretch endlessly as Willow alternated between anticipation and self-admonishment for her schoolgirl-like excitement. She threw herself into her work with unusual vigor, thoroughly cleaning the cabin, baking not only bread but also a wild berry pie, and even cutting fresh wildflowers for the table, all while telling herself these efforts were routine rather than preparations for Hunter's visit. By late afternoon, she had changed her blouse twice, rearranged the cabin's sparse furnishings several times, and checked the path toward the Galloway property so often that Patch had given up following her and retreated to a shady spot with an expression that seemed remarkably like exasperation. "This is ridiculous," Willow muttered to herself as she smoothed her hair for the dozenth time. "He's just coming for coffee." Yet she couldn't deny the quickening of her pulse when she finally spotted Hunter approaching, riding at an unhurried pace that suggested he'd completed his day's work and cleaned up before coming. He wore a fresh shirt beneath his vest, and his hair was still damp from washing. Willow busied herself at the stove, pretending she hadn't been watching for him, and only stepped onto the porch when he was nearly at her gate. "Good evening," he called, dismounting and securing his horse to the hitching post. "Hope I'm not too late." "Not at all," she replied, noticing he carried not only the promised honey but also a small package wrapped in brown paper. "Coffee's just ready." Hunter approached the porch, removing his hat as he climbed the steps. "Something smells wonderful." "Fresh bread," Willow explained, suddenly self-conscious about the extra efforts she'd made. And pie. His smile was appreciative. You've been busy. Baking day, she said with forced casualness, leading him inside. Would have happened regardless. The lie was transparent, but Hunter graciously let it pass unremarked. Instead, he glanced around the cabin with genuine interest. The space was modest but meticulously maintained, with handcrafted furniture built by her father, colorful woven blankets reflecting her mother's heritage, and practical arrangements that maximized the limited area. "You have a beautiful home," he said, his tone sincere. "It's small but sufficient for my needs," Willow replied, moving to pour coffee into the cups she'd set out earlier. Hunter placed the jar of honey on the table, then hesitated before extending the wrapped package. "I brought something else, a small token." Surprised, Willow accepted the parcel. This wasn't necessary. "Necessity rarely factors into giving," he observed quietly. "Please open it." Carefully unwrapping the paper, she revealed a small leather-bound book. Opening it, she discovered it was a collection of poetry, the pages well-worn but cared for. "Wordsworth," she read from the title page. "I've heard of him but never read his work. He writes about nature and its effect on the human spirit," Hunter explained. "I thought you might appreciate his perspective given your connection to the land." The thoughtfulness of the gift touched her deeply. "Thank you, I'll treasure it. It was my mother's," he added quietly. "One of the few possessions I've carried with me over the years." The revelation stunned her. "Hunter, I can't accept something so personal." "You can," he interrupted gently. "Books are meant to be shared. And I've carried his words in my heart for so long, I don't need the physical pages to remember them." Willow carefully placed the book on the table, moved beyond words by the gesture. "Then I'm honored, truly." Their eyes met across the small space, and something shifted between them, a deepening of connection that transcended their still limited acquaintance. The moment was broken by the kettle's insistent whistle. Willow turned to remove it from the heat, using the task to compose herself. "Please, sit. I'll serve the coffee." The initial awkwardness gradually faded as they settled at the table, conversation flowing more easily with each passing minute. Hunter spoke of his day's work with the cattle, describing with wry humor how a particularly stubborn heifer had led them on a merry chase through thickets that left both horses and riders scratched and frustrated. Willow found herself laughing more than she had in months, then reciprocating with stories of her own livestock misadventures. When she described chasing an escaped pig through her vegetable garden, only to end up face down in mud while the unrepentant animal watched from a safe distance, Hunter's deep laughter filled the cabin with a warmth that seemed to reach into corners long left cold. They lingered over coffee and pie as afternoon shifted to evening, the quality of light changing from gold to amber to the soft purple of dusk. Neither seemed inclined to note the passing time, too engaged in discovering the unexpected territories of shared interests and complementary perspectives. It was only when Willow rose to light the oil lamp that the lateness of the hour became impossible to ignore. "I should go," Hunter said reluctantly, though he made no immediate move to stand. "I've imposed on your hospitality far longer than intended." "It hasn't felt like an imposition," Willow admitted, surprising herself with her honesty. His expression softened. "No, no." She returned to her seat, the lamp casting a gentle glow between them. "It's been pleasant having company, just pleasant." His tone held a teasing note that made her smile despite herself. "Perhaps more than pleasant," she conceded. "Though I warn you, acknowledging that will only encourage your presumptuousness." Hunter's laugh was warm. "I prefer to think of it as persistence rather than presumption." "A fine distinction," she observed dryly, "but an important one." He leaned forward slightly, his expression growing more serious. Presumption assumes entitlement. Persistence merely hopes for opportunity. The subtle shift in tone created an intimacy that both alarmed and attracted her. Willow found herself suddenly aware of how isolated they were, how close he sat, how easy it would be to bridge the small distance between them. As if sensing her thoughts, Hunter stood, breaking the moment. "I really should go. Helena expects all hands at breakfast before dawn. We're moving cattle to the eastern pasture tomorrow." Willow nodded, both relieved and disappointed by his responsible decision. "Of course." She walked him to the door, where he paused to don his hat. In the lamplight, his features were cast in strong relief, emphasizing the quiet strength that had first caught her attention. "Thank you for this evening," he said softly. "For the coffee, the conversation, and mostly for your company." "Thank you for the book," she replied. "And the honey." He smiled. Simple gifts for a complex woman. Before she could respond, he reached out slowly, telegraphing his intention clearly enough that she could have stepped back had she wished. When she remained still, he gently tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, his fingers barely grazing her cheek in a touch so light it might have been imagined. "Good night, Willow." "Good night, Hunter." She watched from the doorway as he mounted his horse and rode away, the sound of hoofbeats gradually fading into the soft symphony of night insects and distant coyote calls. Only when he had disappeared entirely did Willow close the door, leaning against it as she attempted to make sense of the emotions swirling through her. Independence had been her shield and purpose for so long that the possibility of allowing someone past those carefully constructed defenses was both exhilarating and terrifying. Hunter Raid represented an unknown variable in her meticulously planned existence, a potential for both joy and pain that she had deliberately avoided since her father's death. Yet as she prepared for bed, Willow found herself opening the poetry book, reading by lamplight until sleep finally claimed her. The last conscious thought she had was that some risks, perhaps, were worth taking after all. The following weeks brought a new rhythm to Willow's life. Hunter's work frequently brought him to the northern pastures, and he began stopping by her homestead with increasing regularity. Sometimes the visits were brief, a quick greeting as he passed on horseback, or a few minutes of conversation when their paths crossed near the creek. Other times he stayed longer, helping with repairs that required an extra pair of hands, or simply sharing coffee as the evening shadows lengthened. Each encounter deepened their connection, filling in the outline of the man she'd first met with details that transformed him from stranger to something else. Something Willow wasn't quite ready to name, though the word hovered at the edges of her consciousness during quiet moments. She learned that Hunter had been raised primarily by his mother after his father's death in a mining accident when he was 10. That he'd received more formal education than most men of his background, thanks to his mother's insistence and sacrifice. That he could quote Shakespeare and calculate complex mathematics with equal facility, yet valued practical knowledge above academic learning. He learned about her childhood divided between two cultures, her father's patient teaching of survival skills, her mother's stories and traditions. About her dreams of expanding her modest farm to include fruit trees and perhaps beehives of her own. About her fierce attachment to the land that had shaped her. Summer was advancing toward its peak when Helena Galloway invited them both to a gathering at the ranch to celebrate her husband's birthday. The invitation represented Willow's first opportunity to see Hunter in a social setting beyond their private conversations, and she found herself unexpectedly nervous as she prepared for the event. "It's merely a neighborly gathering," she told her reflection as she pinned up her hair more carefully than usual. Nothing more significant, but the flutter in her stomach as she donned her best dress, a deep blue calico saved for special occasions, suggested otherwise. Hunter arrived to escort her as arranged, his own appearance more polished than his daily working attire. He'd trimmed his beard and worn a crisp white shirt beneath a dark vest. The sight of him waiting by the gate, hat in hand, sent a rush of warmth through her that had nothing to do with the July heat. "You look beautiful," he said simply as she approached. "Thank you." Willow accepted his compliment without deflection, a small indication of how their relationship had evolved. "You clean up rather well yourself." His smile was appreciative as he helped her mount her horse. High praise from a woman of discerning taste. The ride to the Galloway ranch was filled with easy conversation and occasional comfortable silences. As they approached the imposing two-story house, Willow could hear music and laughter drifting from the gathering already in progress. "Nervous?" Hunter asked quietly as they dismounted. Willow started to deny it automatically, then reconsidered. "A little. I don't often attend social functions. We don't have to stay long if you're uncomfortable." The simple consideration in his offer touched her. "I'll be fine, especially with—" She hesitated, then finished honestly, "with you there." The warmth in his eyes made her glad of her candor. "Then I'll stay close." True to his word, Hunter remained attentive as they joined the celebration. The Galloways had invited neighbors from miles around, transforming their spacious yard into a festive gathering place with tables of food, musicians playing lively tunes, and lanterns strung between trees in preparation for the evening ahead. Helena greeted them warmly, making introductions where necessary, though most guests knew Willow at least by reputation. If anyone was surprised to see the solitary homesteader arriving with Hunter Reed, they were polite enough to mask it, at least in their direct presence. Willow caught occasional glances and whispered comments that suggested their developing relationship had not gone unnoticed by the community. "People are talking," she murmured to Hunter as they filled plates at the buffet table. "People always talk," he replied easily. "Does it bother you?" Willow considered the question seriously. "Less than I expected, though I wonder what they're saying." Hunter's expression was amused. "Based on Mrs. Abernathy's expression when she saw us arrive together, I'd say speculation ranges from imminent elopement to scandalous impropriety." Despite herself, Willow laughed. Knowing Mrs. Abernathy, probably both simultaneously. As the afternoon progressed into evening, Willow found herself enjoying the gathering more than anticipated. Helena's husband, Thomas, proved an engaging host, sharing stories of his railroad ventures that provided genuine insight into the changing territory. The food was excellent, the music pleasant, and the company, particularly Hunter's, made the hours pass quickly. When the musicians began playing a waltz, several couples moved to the cleared area near the barn that served as a dance floor. Hunter turned to Willow, a question in his eyes. "Would you do me the honor?" he asked, extending his hand. Willow hesitated. Dancing together would make a public statement about their relationship that private conversations had not. Yet she found herself nodding, placing her hand in his with a certainty that surprised her. "I should warn you," she said as he led her to the dance floor. "It's been years since I've danced." "Then we'll relearn together," he replied, his hand settling respectfully at her waist as they took position. The music surrounded them as they began to move, initially with careful attention to steps, then with increasing fluidity as they found their rhythm together. Hunter led with confident grace, guiding rather than controlling, responding to her movements as much as directing them. "You dance well for a man who spent most of his life on horseback," Willow observed, growing more comfortable in his arms. "My mother insisted I learn." said no education was complete without understanding how to move in harmony with another person. His eyes held hers as they turned. She was right, as usual. The simple statement carried layers of meaning that made Willow's heart beat faster. As they continued to dance, the world beyond their shared movement seemed to recede the other couples, the watching guests, even the music becoming secondary to the connection flowing between them. When the waltz ended, Hunter didn't immediately release her hand. Instead, he led her away from the dance floor toward a quieter area near the garden, where lantern light gave way to the softer glow of early stars. "Thank you for the dance," he said, his voice low enough that only she could hear. "I enjoyed it more than expected," Willow admitted, finding honesty easier in the gentle darkness. Hunter's expression was serious as he studied her face. "Willow, may I speak plainly?" The formal request sent a flutter of anticipation through her. "Always." He took a deep breath, as if gathering courage. "These past weeks have been the happiest I've known in years. Being with you, talking, working, even just sharing silence has brought a peace I didn't realize I was missing." The sincerity in his voice touched something deep within her. "I've felt it too," she acknowledged softly. "I came to Redemption Creek looking for a place to belong," he continued. "I didn't expect to find a person to belong with instead." Willow's breath caught at the implication. "Hunter, I'm not asking for promises," he said quickly. "I understand your independence is precious to you. I would never wish to diminish that." He paused, searching for words. "I'm simply telling you that my heart has found its home, whether or not you choose to welcome it." The declaration hung between them, honest and undemanding yet profound in its implications. Willow found herself speechless, overwhelmed by emotions she'd kept carefully controlled for so long. "I don't know what to say," she admitted finally. Hunter smiled gently. "You don't need to say anything." "Not yet." He reached out, his fingers lightly touching hers. "I just wanted you to know where I stand." Before she could respond, they were interrupted by Helena calling for everyone's attention as Thomas prepared to make a speech. The moment of private connection broke as they rejoined the gathering. But something had fundamentally shifted between them, a truth spoken that could not be unheard. Throughout the remainder of the evening, Willow found herself acutely aware of Hunter's presence nearby, of the occasional brush of his hand against hers, of the warmth in his eyes when their gazes met across the crowded yard. His declaration had changed nothing tangible, yet had transformed everything essential. As the celebration wound down and they prepared to depart, Helena pulled Willow aside for a moment of private conversation. "I've never seen you so at ease at a gathering," her friend observed with gentle directness. "Hunter seems to be good for you." Willow glanced across the yard where Hunter was helping an elderly neighbor mount his wagon. "He's different from what I expected." Helena smiled knowingly. "The best ones usually are." She squeezed Willow's hand. "Just remember, independence doesn't have to mean solitude. Some burdens are lighter when shared." The ride home was quieter than their journey to the ranch, both of them seemingly lost in private thoughts. The night was clear, stars scattered across the vast Montana sky like diamond dust, the air carrying the sweet scent of summer grasses and distant pine. As they approached Willow's homestead, she broke the comfortable silence. "Did you mean what you said earlier about not wanting to diminish my independence?" Hunter nodded, his expression thoughtful in the moonlight. "Your strength, your self-sufficiency, they're integral to who you are. I would never ask you to be less than your full self to accommodate me." "Most men would," she observed, remembering previous suitors who had seen her capability as something to overcome rather than admire. "I'm not most men," he replied simply. "And you're certainly not most women." They reached her gate, and Hunter dismounted to help her down from her horse. His hands were warm and steady at her waist, lingering a moment longer than necessary after her feet touched ground. "Thank you for accompanying me tonight," he said softly. Willow looked up at him, suddenly certain of what she wanted. "Hunter." "Yes." "I think perhaps I would like you to kiss me now." His eyes widened slightly, then softened with unmistakable emotion. "Are you certain?" In answer, Willow stepped closer, her hand rising to rest lightly against his chest. The steady beat of his heart beneath her palm gave her courage. "Yes," she whispered. With infinite gentleness, Hunter cupped her face in his hands, his touch reverent as his lips met hers. The kiss was tender, unhurried, a question and answer exchanged without words. Willow felt something unfurl within her, a tightly closed bud finally opening to sunlight after too long in shadow. When they eventually parted, Hunter rested his forehead against hers, his breath mingling with her own in the small space between them. "I've been wanting to do that since the day we met," he admitted, his voice husky with emotion. "Even when I was being stubborn and dismissive," she asked, a smile curving her lips. "Especially then." His thumb traced the line of her cheekbone with exquisite care. "Your fire is as compelling as your tenderness, Willow Stone." The declaration warmed her more deeply than the summer night warranted. "You should go," she said reluctantly. "It's late." Hunter nodded, though he made no immediate move to release her. "May I call on you properly tomorrow?" The formal request made her smile widen. "Yes, I would like that very much." With visible effort, he stepped back, his hands slowly falling away from her face. "Until tomorrow, then." Willow watched him mount and ride away, her fingers touching her lips where the warmth of his kiss still lingered. For the first time in years, she allowed herself to imagine a future different from the solitary path she had assumed. Was her destiny one that included shared joys, mutual support, and a love that enhanced rather than limited her hard-won independence? The thought was both terrifying and exhilarating, but as she turned toward her cabin, Willow realized the fear was overshadowed by something stronger: hope. True to his word, Hunter called on her the following day, arriving in mid-afternoon with wildflowers gathered from the meadows, and a gentle formality that made Willow smile despite herself. They spent hours talking on her porch as the summer day gradually surrendered to evening, neither mentioning directly the shift in their relationship, yet both acutely aware of it in every glance and casual touch. Over the following weeks, a new pattern emerged. Hunter continued his work at the Galloway Ranch, but spent most evenings at Willow's homestead. Sometimes they simply shared a meal and conversation. Other times they worked together on projects around her property, building a new chicken coop, reinforcing the barn's roof, expanding her garden with an eye toward fall harvest. In these shared tasks, Willow discovered a partnership unlike anything she'd previously experienced or imagined. Hunter worked alongside her rather than for her, respecting her knowledge of her own land while contributing his skills where needed. He never assumed control or authority, instead offering suggestions that she was free to accept or reject without injury to his pride. August arrived with its intense heat and sudden thunderstorms, turning the landscape a deeper gold as summer began its gradual transition toward autumn. One evening, as they sat on Willow's porch watching lightning dance on distant mountains, Hunter broached a subject they had both been carefully avoiding. "Helena mentioned today that they'll be sending a cattle drive to the railroad at Great Falls next month," he said, his tone deliberately casual. "They've asked me to help lead it." Willow's hands stilled in their work. She had been mending a shirt as they talked. "I see. How long would you be gone?" 2 weeks, maybe 3 depending on weather and trail conditions. Hunter watched her carefully. "It's good money, and Helena specifically requested me." Then you should go, Willow said, returning to her stitching with forced concentration. It's an opportunity you shouldn't refuse. A moment of silence stretched between them before Hunter spoke again. That's not what concerns me, Willow. She looked up, meeting his steady gaze. What does? Whether you'll still be willing to explore whatever this is between us when I return. His voice held no accusation, only honest inquiry. Your independence is important to you. I understand if 3 weeks away seems like an opening to reconsider. The suggestion that she might retreat to her solitary existence in his absence struck Willow with unexpected force. The thought of returning to life without Hunter's presence, his quiet laughter, his thoughtful observations, his gentle touch created an emptiness she could almost physically feel. "Is that what you think of me?" she asked softly. "That my feelings are so shallow they would change with a few weeks' separation?" Hunter shook his head, reaching across to take her hand. "No, but I know how difficult it's been for you to allow someone close after so long on your own. I wouldn't blame you for having second thoughts." Willow set aside her mending, turning to face him fully. "Hunter Reed, I am many things: stubborn, occasionally prickly, fiercely independent, but I am not fickle. What I feel for you—" She paused, gathering courage to speak words she had barely admitted to herself. "What I feel is not something that will fade in your absence." The vulnerability in her admission hung between them like a fragile thread. Hunter's expression softened as he lifted her hand to his lips, placing a gentle kiss against her knuckles. "I'll miss you every day," he said simply. "And I you," she replied, surprising herself with the ease of the confession. "But we are both accustomed to doing what needs to be done, regardless of personal preference." He nodded, his thumb tracing circles on her palm. "Still, 3 weeks is a long time." "Then we should make the most of the days before you leave," Willow suggested, her cheeks warming at her own boldness. Hunter's smile was both tender and heated, sending a pleasant shiver through her despite the August warmth. "I believe that's the wisest suggestion you've made yet, Miss Stone." The days before Hunter's departure passed too quickly, each filled with shared work and private moments that deepened their connection. Willow found herself memorizing details: the exact timbre of his laugh, the precise shade of his eyes in different lights, the gentle strength of his hands, storing them away like provisions against the coming absence. The morning he was to leave dawned with a spectacular sunrise, the eastern sky ablaze with color as Willow walked with Hunter to where his horse waited, already saddled and loaded for the journey. "The cattle drive assembles at the Galloway Ranch at noon," he said, his reluctance to depart evident in his lingering presence despite the hour. "I should go." Willow nodded, fighting to maintain her composure. "You should. The sooner you leave, the sooner you'll return." Hunter cupped her face in his hands, his gaze intense. "Willow Stone, you have become the center of my world in ways I never anticipated. These weeks apart will change nothing of what I feel for you." "I know," she whispered, covering his hands with her own. His kiss was tender yet tinged with passion, a promise and a reluctant farewell combined. When they finally parted, Willow stepped back, squaring her shoulders with determined dignity. "Be safe," she said simply. Hunter nodded, mounting his horse with fluid grace. 3 weeks, he promised. No longer. She watched him ride away, remaining by the gate long after he disappeared from sight. The emptiness that followed his departure was deeper than she'd anticipated, a hollow ache that settled beneath her ribs like an unwelcome guest. "This is ridiculous," she muttered to herself, turning back toward the cabin with determined steps. "You managed perfectly well before Hunter Reed appeared. 3 weeks is nothing." Yet as she moved through her morning chores, Willow couldn't deny that his absence had altered the very atmosphere of her homestead. The cabin seemed quieter, the work more solitary, the hours longer without his presence to break the familiar routines. The first week passed slowly, each day filled with the necessary tasks of maintaining her property. Willow threw herself into her work with increased vigor, exhausting herself physically in hopes of quieting the thoughts that kept her awake at night, wondering where Hunter was, if he was safe, if he thought of her as often as she thought of him. Helena visited once, bringing news of the cattle drive's departure and her own wry observations about Hunter's obvious reluctance to leave. The visit provided welcome distraction, though Willow found herself uncharacteristically hesitant to discuss her evolving relationship with the rancher's wife. "He'll be back before you know it," Helena assured her as she prepared to leave. "Thomas says the railroad agent is eager for the delivery. They'll process the herd quickly once it arrives." Willow nodded, appreciating the information while attempting to maintain a casual demeanor. "I'm sure Mr. Reed is more than capable of handling whatever challenges arise." Helena's knowing smile suggested Willow's nonchalance was less convincing than intended. "Indeed he is, though I suspect he's counting the days until his return as eagerly as some others might be." The second week brought an unexpected development. A letter arrived via Helena's ranch hand, the first written communication Willow had ever received from Hunter. His handwriting was surprisingly elegant, the words carefully chosen. "My dearest Willow, we've reached the halfway point of our journey without serious incident, though 2 days of rain slowed our progress through the eastern foothills. The cattle are in good condition, and if weather permits, we should reach Great Falls within a week. I find myself thinking of you constantly during long hours in the saddle, around the campfire at night, in the brief moments before sleep claims me. The memory of your smile has become my companion on this journey, a light that guides me back toward home. For I have come to realize that home is no longer a place to me but a person. You, Willow Stone, have become my true north, the point around which my world now turns. I will return to you as swiftly as circumstances allow." With deepest affection, Hunter Willow read the letter repeatedly until the words became imprinted on her heart, each reading revealing new layers of meaning in his carefully chosen phrases. The declaration that she had become his home resonated particularly deeply, touching a longing she had scarcely acknowledged even to herself. That night, she took out the poetry book he had given her, finding new meaning in Wordsworth's reflections on nature and human connection. One passage in particular caught her attention. "What we have loved, others will love, and we will teach them how." The words seemed to capture something essential about what was developing between them, a shared appreciation for the land, for independence, and for the unexpected joy of finding someone who understood both. The third week brought increasing anticipation, mixed with a gnawing concern as days passed beyond Hunter's estimated return date. Willow told herself that delays were common on cattle drives, that numerous legitimate reasons could explain the extended absence. Yet as each sunset arrived without bringing Hunter with it, her worry deepened. She was splitting firewood with perhaps more force than necessary when Helena's husband Thomas rode up to her homestead, his expression grave in a way that immediately sent a chill through her. "Thomas," she acknowledged, setting down her axe, "this is unexpected." He dismounted, removing his hat, a gesture that increased her foreboding. "Miss Stone, I've come with news about the cattle drive." Willow's heart seemed to stop, then resume at a frantic pace. "Hunter." "There was trouble in Great Falls," Thomas said, his tone carefully measured. "After the cattle were delivered, Hunter and 2 others stayed in town to complete the paperwork while the rest started back. According to the telegram I received this morning, they were attacked while leaving the bank." The world seemed to narrow to a pinpoint as Willow struggled to process his words. Attacked? By whom? Robbers, apparently. The money from the cattle sale made them targets. Thomas hesitated before continuing. Hunter and one of the Galloway hands were wounded. The third man was killed. How badly is he hurt? Willow's voice sounded distant to her own ears. The telegram didn't specify, only that Hunter was being treated by a doctor in Great Falls and would return when able to travel. Thomas shifted uncomfortably. I came as soon as we received word, knowing you would want to know. Willow nodded mechanically, her mind racing through possibilities and implications. Thank you for telling me personally. Helena thought. He hesitated again. She thought you might want to go to Great Falls. If so, I can arrange transportation on tomorrow's eastbound train. The offer pierced through the fog of shock surrounding her. Yes, she said immediately. Yes, I need to go. Thomas nodded, seemingly unsurprised by her decision. Pack what you need for several days. I'll send a wagon at first light to take you to the station. After he left, Willow stood motionless in her yard, the half-split log forgotten at her feet. The possibility of losing Hunter, just as their relationship was blossoming into something profound, struck her with devastating force. She had lost so many people already: her mother, her father, childhood friends to disease and accident, that the pattern had seemed inevitable, reinforcing her determination to rely solely on herself. Yet somewhere in the past months, without fully realizing it, she had allowed Hunter past those defenses. His absence had revealed how thoroughly he had integrated himself into her life, her thoughts, her future plans. The prospect of a world without him in it was suddenly, shockingly unbearable. With renewed purpose, Willow returned to her cabin to prepare for the journey. Whatever had happened in Great Falls, whatever condition she might find him in, one thing had become crystal clear. Hunter Reed was no longer simply a man she was coming to care for. He had become essential to her happiness in ways she had never anticipated or allowed before. The train journey to Great Falls was the longest of Willow's life, each mile simultaneously bringing her closer to Hunter and intensifying her fears about what she might find. Thomas had arranged everything with characteristic efficiency: transportation to the station, a first-class ticket, and a letter of introduction to his business associate in Great Falls, who would help her locate Hunter upon arrival. As Montana's vast landscape rolled past the window, Willow attempted to prepare herself for all possibilities. Hunter might be seriously injured, perhaps permanently disabled. He might be delirious with fever or infection. He might even be— No, she refused to complete that thought. The telegram had said wounded, not dying. She clung to that distinction with desperate hope. Great Falls appeared on the horizon by mid-afternoon, its buildings more numerous and substantial than Redemption Creek's modest structures. The railroad had transformed this former trading post into a bustling commercial center, where cattle from surrounding ranches were loaded onto eastbound trains bound for Chicago and beyond. Thomas's associate, Mr. Harrington, met her at the station as arranged, a portly, efficient man who wasted no time with pleasantries beyond basic introductions. "I've located Mr. Reed," he informed her as he helped her into his waiting carriage. "He's being treated at Dr. Wilson's residence on Front Street. The doctor often keeps serious cases in his home rather than the town's small hospital." The word "serious" sent a fresh wave of anxiety through Willow. How badly is he injured? "I'm afraid I don't have those details, Miss Stone. I merely confirmed his location." Mr. Harrington signaled his driver to proceed. "We'll know more shortly." The carriage rattled through streets busier than any Willow had seen since her one childhood visit to Helena, the territorial capital. Under different circumstances, she might have been fascinated by the signs of progress and prosperity, the brick buildings, the gas street lamps being installed, the variety of businesses catering to a growing population. Now, she barely registered these details, her thoughts focused entirely on reaching Hunter. Dr. Wilson's residence proved to be a handsome two-story home on a tree-lined street, somewhat removed from the commercial district. A brass plaque beside the door identified it as both dwelling and medical practice. Mr. Harrington escorted Willow to the entrance, where they were met by a stern-faced older woman who introduced herself as Mrs. Wilson, the doctor's wife and nurse. "You're here about Mr. Reed?" she asked, her expression softening slightly as she took in Willow's travel-worn appearance and evident concern. "Yes, I'm Willow Stone. Is he? How is he?" Mrs. Wilson gestured them inside. "My husband can provide the medical details, but Mr. Reed is stable now. The fever broke yesterday, which is an encouraging sign." Fever? Willow's anxiety spiked anew. "A common complication with gunshot wounds, I'm afraid." Mrs. Wilson led them into a parlor converted to a waiting area. "Please sit. I'll inform the doctor you've arrived." "Alone with Mr. Harrington." Willow struggled to maintain her composure. Gunshot wounds, fever. The clinical terms seemed inadequate to describe what Hunter must have endured in the days since the attack. "Miss Stone," Mr. Harrington said gently, "I have some business matters to attend to in town. Would you prefer I stay until you've spoken with the doctor, or shall I return later to escort you to your hotel?" The question reminded Willow of practical considerations she'd barely considered in her rush to reach Hunter. "The hotel, yes. I should arrange accommodations." "Already taken care of," he assured her. "Mr. Galloway telegraphed instructions. A room has been reserved for you at the Grand Hotel for as long as needed." Relief at this small kindness mingled with her overwhelming concern. "Thank you. Perhaps you could return in an hour. By then I should know more about what happens next." Mr. Harrington nodded, taking his leave just as an older gentleman with a neatly trimmed white beard entered the room. "Miss Stone, I'm Dr. Wilson." His handshake was firm, his manner direct but not unkind. "I understand you've traveled quite a distance to see Mr. Reed." "Yes, we're—" Willow hesitated, uncertain how to define their relationship. "Close friends. How is he, doctor? I was told he was shot." Dr. Wilson gestured for her to sit again. "Yes, Mr. Reed was struck twice during the robbery attempt. One bullet grazed his left shoulder, a minor wound that's healing well. The second was more serious, entering his right side and lodging near his lower ribs." Willow fought to keep her voice steady. "But he will recover." "I believe so, yes." The doctor's expression was cautiously optimistic. The surgery to remove the bullet was successful, and now that the fever has subsided, infection seems unlikely. However, he remains quite weak from blood loss and the fever's toll. Recovery will take time and patience. "May I see him?" The question came out more pleading than intended. Dr. Wilson studied her for a moment, then nodded. Briefly, "He's been asking for you since he became lucid yesterday. I suspect seeing you will do more good than any medicine I might prescribe at this point." He led her upstairs to a small but well-appointed room that had clearly been converted for medical use. The bed dominated the space, its white linen stark against the dark wood furniture. And there, propped slightly against several pillows, was Hunter, pale, thinner than she remembered but unmistakably alive. His eyes were closed when they entered but opened at the sound of the door. When his gaze found her, his expression transformed with such naked joy that Willow felt tears spring to her eyes. "Willow," he whispered, his voice hoarse but clear. "You came." "Of course I came, you fool," she replied, moving swiftly to his bedside. Did you think I wouldn't, Doctor? Wilson cleared his throat discreetly. I'll leave you two alone for a few minutes. Miss Stone, remember that Mr. Reed needs rest above all else. Willow barely registered his departure, her attention fixed entirely on Hunter. Up close, the evidence of his ordeal was even more apparent: the pallor beneath his tan, the shadows under his eyes, the careful way he held himself to avoid aggravating his wounds. You look terrible, she said, taking his hand between both of hers. A ghost of his usual smile touched his lips. Always honest, it's one of the things I love about you. The casual declaration of love made her breath catch. Hunter, let me finish, he interrupted gently. I've had plenty of time lying here to think about what matters, what I want to say to you if I got the chance. His fingers tightened weakly around hers. I love you, Willow Stone, not despite your independence but because of it, because you know your own mind and heart, because you're the strongest person I've ever known. Tears spilled down Willow's cheeks, unchecked and unashamed. I thought I might lose you before I could tell you. Tell me what? His eyes held hers, hope visible despite his exhaustion. That I love you too, she whispered. That somewhere between fixing fences and reading poetry and sharing coffee on my porch, you became essential to me. That the thought of a future without you in it is unbearable. Hunter's free hand rose shakily to touch her face, his thumb gently wiping away a tear. I'm not going anywhere, he promised. Not anymore. I've found where I belong. With me, Willow said, the words both question and declaration. With you, he confirmed. If you'll have me. The simplicity of their exchange belied its profound significance, two independent souls choosing to intertwine their paths without sacrifice of self or principle. Willow leaned forward, pressing her forehead against his in a gesture of connection that required no further words. They remained that way until Dr. Wilson returned, reluctantly separating when he insisted Hunter needed rest. But as Willow prepared to leave, promising to return the following morning, Hunter caught her hand once more. When I'm well enough to travel, he said softly, I'm coming home. To you. The words accompanied her like a talisman as she left the doctor's house, sustaining her through the unfamiliar routines of the hotel and the long night ahead. Hunter loved her. He was recovering. He was coming home to her. For the first time since receiving news of the attack, Willow allowed herself to believe in a future beyond the immediate crisis, a future that held more joy than she had ever dared to imagine for herself. The next 2 weeks passed in a rhythm dictated by Hunter's recovery. Willow spent most of each day at Dr. Wilson's house, reading to Hunter from local newspapers, helping him take short walks as his strength gradually returned, and simply being present as he regained his health. In the evenings, she returned to the hotel, exhausted but increasingly hopeful as his improvement became more pronounced with each passing day. During this time, they talked more openly than ever before about their pasts, their hopes, and the future they might build together. Hunter spoke of his mother's death 5 years earlier, the event that had set him on his path of restless wandering until Redemption Creek. Willow shared memories of her parents' unconventional but loving partnership, revealing how it had shaped her own views on marriage and independence. My father never tried to make my mother into something she wasn't, she explained one afternoon as they sat in Dr. Wilson's garden. He respected her heritage, her knowledge, her ways of seeing the world, and she did the same for him. They were partners in the truest sense. Hunter nodded thoughtfully. That's rare, even now. Most marriages I've observed seem more like business arrangements or ownership transfers than partnerships. Is that why you never married? Willow asked, realizing she had never questioned his past in this regard. Partly, he admitted. and partly because I never met anyone who made me want to stay in one place long enough to build something lasting. His hand found hers, fingers intertwining naturally. Until you. The simple declaration warmed her more thoroughly than the September sunshine. You make it sound so straightforward, isn't it? Hunter's expression was earnest. I love you. I want to build a life with you, not by changing who you are or asking you to be less independent, but by standing beside you through whatever comes. That seems straightforward to me. Put that way, it did seem simple. The complications Willow had anticipated reconciling her fierce independence with the compromises inherent in partnership somehow felt less daunting when framed as Hunter presented them. I want that too, she admitted softly. A life with you. Though I warn you, I'm unlikely to become less stubborn with time. His laugh, stronger now than in the early days of his recovery, was a welcome sound. I would be disappointed if you did. Your stubbornness is part of your charm, Miss Stone. By the third week, Doctor. Wilson declared Hunter well enough to travel, though he insisted on a comfortable conveyance rather than horseback for the journey home. Arrangements were made through Thomas Galloway's business connections for a private compartment on the westbound train, with additional transportation from the station to Redemption Creek. The night before their departure, as Willow prepared to leave the doctor's house for her final evening at the hotel, Hunter asked her to stay a moment longer. There's something I want to ask you, he said, his expression more serious than it had been in days. Something I've been considering since before the cattle drive, but recent events have made even more clear to me. A flutter of anticipation stirred in Willow's chest as she sat beside him on the small sofa in his room. What is it? Hunter took her hands in his thumbs tracing gentle patterns across her knuckles. Willow Stone, I love you more than I ever thought possible. These weeks of recovery have shown me how precious life is, and how much I want to spend whatever years I have left building something meaningful with you. He paused, meeting her gaze directly. I'm not asking you to change who you are or surrender your independence. I'm asking if you'll consider joining your life with mine as equals, as partners, as two people who are stronger together than apart. The words hung between them, their significance unmistakable, though he hadn't used the traditional phrasing. Willow found herself momentarily speechless, overwhelmed not by uncertainty but by the perfect rightness of what he proposed. Are you asking me to marry you, Hunter Reed? She finally managed, needing to hear the specific question. His smile was tender. Yes, I am. Though I want to be clear, I'm not asking to own you or protect you or save you from anything. I'm asking to love you, to work beside you, to face whatever comes together rather than separately. Tears pricked at Willow's eyes, not of sadness, but of a joy so intense it was almost painful. Then my answer is yes. Yes, I will marry you. The simplicity of her response belied the magnitude of the decision. A woman who had built her life around self-reliance, choosing to open her heart and home to partnership. Not from weakness or necessity, but from the strength of knowing her own mind and recognizing in Hunter a soul who truly saw and valued her exactly as she was. His kiss was gentle, mindful of his still healing wounds, yet conveyed a depth of emotion that needed no words to express. When they finally parted, Hunter reached into his pocket and withdrew a small object. I've been carrying this since the day before the cattle drive, he said, opening his palm to reveal a ring, a simple band of gold set with a small, perfect pearl. It was my mother's. I'd like you to have it if you're willing. Willow extended her hand, allowing him to slip the ring onto her finger. It's beautiful, she whispered, touched by the sentiment behind the gesture. I'll treasure it always. We can be married whenever you wish, Hunter said, his thumb caressing the ring now resting on her hand. I have no desire to rush you. Willow considered this, then smiled. What about when the harvest is complete? Mid-October would give us time to prepare, and the weather should still be favorable. Mid-October it is, he agreed readily. A perfect time for new beginnings. The journey home the following day was long but filled with a quiet happiness that made the hours pass quickly. As the train carried them westward through Montana's varied landscape, Willow found herself planning aloud practical matters of combining households, adjustments to accommodate Hunter's presence, projects they might undertake together. I've been thinking, Hunter said during a lull in her considerations, about the land between your homestead and the Galloway property. Willow glanced at him curiously. What about it? That unclaimed section to the west of your creek, it would make an excellent expansion for your farm. With additional acreage, we could plant an orchard as you've mentioned wanting, maybe increase the garden substantially. The casual "we" in his statement warmed her. The soil there is good, she acknowledged, but filing a claim takes time and money. Hunter smiled slightly. As it happens, I've saved most of my earnings over the years. Few opportunities to spend money on the trail. And Thomas mentioned the land office has streamlined the process considerably since the railroad came through. Willow studied him thoughtfully. You've given this serious consideration. I have, he admitted. I want to contribute meaningfully to our future, not just as additional labor for what you've already built, but as a partner in creating something new together. The sentiment touched her deeply. Hunter understood that true partnership meant building together, not merely stepping into what she had already established. It was yet another indication of how thoroughly he respected her independence while still offering genuine connection. I like the idea, she said finally. The orchard especially. My mother always wanted fruit trees, but the original homestead plot wasn't suitable for them. Hunter's expression warmed. Then we'll make it happen, for both of you. By the time they reached Redemption Creek, twilight was descending on the landscape, bathing everything in golden light that gradually deepened to purple. The town itself was quiet, most businesses already closed for the day, though light and music spilled from the saloon onto the dusty street. Thomas Galloway had arranged for a wagon to meet them, driven by one of his ranch hands who greeted Hunter with obvious relief at seeing him recovered. The final leg of their journey passed in comfortable silence, both of them tired from travel, yet increasingly alert as familiar landmarks appeared in the gathering darkness. When they finally crested the last hill and Willow's homestead came into view, a light burning in the window indicated Helena's thoughtfulness. She had clearly arranged for someone to prepare the cabin for their return. Home, Hunter said softly, his hand finding Willow's in the darkness of the wagon bed. Yes, she agreed, the word encompassing not just the physical structure but the life they would build there together. Home. The following weeks passed in a whirlwind of activity, as Willow completed her harvest, while Hunter divided his time between helping her and fulfilling his remaining obligations to the Galloway ranch. Together, they filed the claim for the additional land, making plans for improvements that would begin as soon as the paperwork was finalized. Word of their engagement spread quickly through the community, generating a range of reactions from genuine congratulations to thinly veiled surprise that the independent Willow Stone had finally chosen to marry. Helena Galloway took particular delight in the news, appointing herself unofficial coordinator of wedding preparations despite Willow's insistence on simplicity. It may be a small ceremony, Helena declared during one of her frequent visits, but it will still be proper. Thomas and I insist on hosting it at the ranch. The garden will be perfect with the autumn colors. Willow, recognizing her friend's genuine desire to contribute to their happiness, eventually acquiesced to this and other arrangements. Hunter watched these negotiations with amused tolerance, content to let the women determine the details, while he focused on preparing their home and land for the coming winter. As the wedding day approached, Willow found herself experiencing not the trepidation she might once have expected, but a deepening certainty that the path she had chosen was right. Hunter had seamlessly integrated himself into her life, enhancing rather than diminishing her sense of self. Their partnership already felt natural, a balanced exchange of strengths and vulnerabilities that made both of them more complete. The morning of their wedding dawned clear and crisp, the October air carrying the scent of pine and distant snow from the mountains. Helena arrived early to help Willow prepare, bringing with her a dress that took Willow's breath away, cream-colored silk overlaid with delicate lace, simple yet elegant in a way that perfectly suited her. "It was my mother's," Helena explained as Willow ran reverent fingers over the fabric. "Altered to fit you, of course, something borrowed as tradition requires." Touched beyond words, Willow embraced her friend. "Thank you, it's perfect." As Helena helped her dress and arrange her hair, adorning it with small white flowers gathered from the last blooms of the season, Willow found her thoughts turning to her parents. She wished they could have known Hunter, could have witnessed the happiness she had found with a man who valued her strength as much as her tenderness. They would have approved, she murmured, more to herself than to Helena. Her friend paused in arranging the flowers. "Your parents?" Willow nodded. "My father would have respected Hunter's capabilities and integrity, and my mother, she would have seen how he truly sees me." Helena smiled, understanding in her eyes. "They're with you today in spirit. And I suspect they would be proud of the woman you've become and the partnership you've chosen." The ceremony itself was simple but meaningful, held in the Galloway garden where late roses still bloomed among the turning leaves. Reverend Miller officiated, his words emphasizing not the traditional submission of wife to husband, but the mutual commitment of two individuals choosing to face life's challenges together. Hunter, standing tall and strong despite the lingering evidence of his injuries, looked at Willow with such open adoration that she felt her heart might burst from happiness. When they exchanged vows, promises to respect, support, and cherish each other through whatever life might bring, the words felt not like constraints, but like affirmations of the bond they had already begun to forge. "I now pronounce you husband and wife," Reverend Miller declared, his smile warm as he added, "You may seal your vows with a kiss." Hunter's hands were gentle as they cradled her face, his eyes conveying emotions too profound for words before his lips met hers in a kiss that promised everything words could not express. Around them, the small gathering of friends and neighbors applauded, but Willow barely registered the sound, too caught up in the perfect moment of connection. The celebration that followed was lively and warm, with food and music and well wishes from the community that had watched their relationship develop. As afternoon stretched into evening, Hunter found Willow standing alone for a moment, watching the sunset paint the distant mountains in gold and crimson. "Happy?" he asked softly, coming to stand beside her. Willow turned to him, her smile radiant. "More than I ever imagined possible." He took her hand, his thumb brushing over the gold band that now accompanied her engagement ring. "I was thinking about that day we first met. You were so determined to prove you needed no help." "I remember," she said, a hint of amusement in her tone. "I was rather dismissive of your offer." "You said you didn't need saving," Hunter recalled, his expression thoughtful. "And I said, then let me just love you," Willow finished for him. I thought it was the most outrageous thing anyone had ever said to me. Hunter laughed softly. It was rather forward of me. It was, she agreed, stepping closer to him. But it was also exactly what I needed to hear, though I didn't realize it then. His arms encircled her waist, drawing her against him. And now, Willow looked up at him, seeing in his eyes the same love and respect that had gradually won her heart over the past months. Now, I understand that loving someone doesn't mean surrendering who you are. It means finding someone who sees your strength as beautiful rather than threatening. Who wants to walk beside you, not ahead or behind. Exactly, Hunter murmured, his forehead resting against hers. That's what I've found with you, Willow Reed, a partner, an equal, a home. As the sun set on their wedding day, casting long shadows across the land they would cultivate together, Willow felt a sense of rightness settle deep in her soul. She had not surrendered her independence or compromised her principles. Instead, she had found a man who valued those qualities, who offered love without demanding submission, who saw her completely and loved what he saw in Hunter's eyes. She was not a wild thing to be tamed, but a strong woman to be cherished. And in that understanding, they had both found what they truly needed, not saving, but loving. Not completion, but complement. Not two halves becoming whole, but two whole people choosing to share their journey. As they rode home that night under a sky brilliant with stars, Willow leaned against her husband's shoulder, content in the knowledge that their story was just beginning, a story they would write together, side by side, in the years to come.